Hello, I'm Kristy Wallace, and this is Suddenly I See, a podcast which explores the power of a positive mindset, gratitude, and love in changing your life for the better. Join me as I share the mind hacks, rituals, and choices that have helped me survive and thrive in the face of adversity to arrive at a point where suddenly I see what truly matters in this life. Let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 14, Prepping for School. This one's going to be good because unlike some other episodes recently, there's no more trauma in it. It's just all good stuff in this episode, and just reflecting and prepping for it, I just brought back all these wonderful, warm, fuzzy feelings of what was a really great time for us getting Paddy ready for school. So our decision on schools started early because we had Audrey who would be going 2 years before Paddy, and we knew we wanted to make the best choice for both our kids and that we wanted them to be at the same school. And it was really important for us that they went together and they weren't separated. So we had a kind of few options in our town. There were 3 schools we could choose from. One of them had a designated support unit within the school, and we just knew in our core that we didn't want Paddy to go to that school and we wanted him to be in a mainstream classroom. So that one was not an option for us. So it came down to the local public school and the Catholic school where I was also a teacher as well. So we decided we'd check out the public school because Paddy had been working, as I mentioned in earlier episodes, with an amazing lady called Lynn, who was with the Department of Education. And if we went to a public school, that meant that Paddy would be able to potentially access working with Lynn, who already had such a great background and start with him. Or if not her, then one of her other fabulous team. So we would have access to highly trained staff, but also reasonable funding too in a public system. Vision impairment actually attracts the highest funding of any disability in the education system because essentially if you're vision impaired, you're trying to learn without receiving 80% of the information that a sighted person will pick up and learn. So when you've got an 80% deficit, that's a huge gap that we're trying to fill. Plus, there's also the need for Braille and other, it's adaptive technologies that need to be used in order for you to access the curriculum. So vision impairment is an incredibly heavily funded disability in the system. And so we took Audrey for orientation at the public school, just as like an open day kind of meet and greet and learn a little bit more about the school. And we were quite happy with what we'd seen so far. So I said to the principal on that day, can I make an appointment to meet with you so that I can discuss my son's needs, who's coming in 2 years' time, but we need to make the decision now so that both our kids can start at the same place. So we booked an appointment and I made Fred come with me because as a teacher myself, and especially already working at one of the schools that was an option, I didn't want to be biased. I wanted to make sure we had an objective opinion on this decision. And it's not just the mum's decision. It's something that we should decide together and we need to bounce off each other with that. So he came along to all of the interviews that we had at both schools as well, which was great. So we met with this principal at the public school, and to be quite honest, I was just underwhelmed with our session. So I'm a prepper. I came in, I had my notebook, I had my pen, I had my questions ready to ask, and the principal had forgotten that she had the meeting. So that was the first kind of hurdle. And then when she did come to the meeting, she basically had nothing prepared. And we'd given her plenty of warning. We'd said who we were. I'd mentioned that he was working with someone from the Department of Education already. So essentially, my expectation was as a principal, she would pick up the phone and call in and say, hey, I've got this family coming in. I hear you've been working with one of their children. How's that going? What do I need to know? But the principal had done zero prep. And for me, that was a massive red flag because I know, having worked in the school system, that it's the leader that sets the tone for what they're going to accept and tolerate in their school and what they're not. And so in my opinion, if the principal wasn't willing to do her research and find out how she could be inclusive of my child, then it's quite likely the expectations are going to be pretty low on her staff to do the same as well. So we went into this meeting, as I say, underwhelmed. She obviously had no answers to any of the questions we were asking because she hadn't prepared for that. And we walked out of there and basically looked at each other and thought, well, looks like we're going to the Catholic school. So we still went ahead and had our meeting with the Catholic school and with our principal. This principal had called in for the meeting in kind of contrast to the other one. She had the learning support teacher there, and she also had the head of disabilities from our Canberra-Goulburn diocese come for that meeting as well. So she had everyone possible in the room that needed to be there to say what they could and couldn't do in supporting Paddy at that school. And we'd given them the suggestion as well that we knew a family in Tamworth whose child was attending the Catholic education system as well and was also vision impaired. And that was Belinda, who I mentioned in previous episodes as, my first kind of mum that I could reach out to. And the school had already followed up and made calls to Tamworth as well to learn a little bit more about what they'd done there. So in my mind, again, the Catholic school had done everything I'd expected and beyond. To have the head of disability from Canberra-Goulburn in a meeting with you is pretty impressive. And they were really honest with saying, look, we do have a couple of other students with vision impairment in our diocese, and it tends to be that they do Braille via a Zoom call with NextSense, or if you may have heard of the Royal Institute for the Deaf and Blind, but now they're branded as NextSense. So that we could set up options for that as well. We'll have to obviously learn a little bit more about Paddy and his needs, but there were no barriers to what they were willing to do. Everything seemed like it was possible, and it was on the table as an option to support Paddy. And so we left that meeting feeling really validated that, yeah, we're actually heading in the right place here if we stay with the Catholic system. And, as I said, as a teacher in there as well, and having seen how this amazing school works, it's where I knew I wanted my kids to go, but I just needed to make sure I'd tried out every option before I locked something in with that. And we knew we have an amazing event every year called Showcase, where every year group puts on a performance, and it's usually dance and music and singing and everything that Audrey loved as well. And we just felt that's such a great creative outlet for her that she's going to enjoy while she's at school. So it ticks a lot of those boxes, as well as it's going to also meet Paddy's needs with his disability as well. And so once we made the decision and spoke to the school to let them know that, they kind of started following up as much as they could. So I guess the tip to start off with here is, if you do have a child with a disability, you need to engage your school at least 2 years before your child starts attending, because trying to get things approved in school systems can take quite a while. And the more time you give schools, the more they can do for you. If you roll in 6 months before and, with this huge list of needs and demands, it's going to be challenging for that school to try and meet that. And that's only going to put your child at a disadvantage. But if you can give them ample time, and I think we were lucky really that we had Audrey going first, so it forced us to have these conversations early. I probably wouldn't have been on my radar perhaps otherwise. So that's my one tip, if I can plant one. Please, the earlier you start talking, the better outcome for your child as well. So the other thing we had to do to try and get the school ready for Paddy was we needed our physios and our OTs that we were working with to come in and assess the school, kind of do a walk around, and based on their knowledge of Paddy and his needs, prepare reports for the school to let them know, look, I think we might need ramp access here. We're going to need some strips on the stairs. So there's some contrast so he can feel where each of the stairs are. And a lot of these things, as I always say, it's, in society now, the things we implement to benefit people with disability impact so many more people than just that one child attending the school. There are other kids who, it's easier for them to see the contrast on the stairs if you have yellow tape on them instead. There are grandparents who visit our schools regularly. If they have a ramp, well, then they can access and feel like they're included and part of the school community as well. So really important, I think, for us as a society to change that we're not just making these adjustments for people with disability, which we should do anyway, but also when we do that, we open up our communities in an even broader way so that it's accessible for everyone and everyone feels comfortable in a space. So many benefits from that. The other really cool thing that, again, just one of those like serendipitous happened to fall in the right place moments, was that while I was teaching at our school, we had the opportunity to attend an Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander conference in Armidale, and myself and another colleague, Lou, at the time, were both the reps that were assisting any Aboriginal students we had in our school to make sure they were accessing the curriculum, make sure the parents were happy with how things were going, that they were supported, and also to try and, promote and educate our broader population of students about Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander culture and history and traditions. So this was the first time that Catholic Education put this on, and it was a huge conference in Armidale with hundreds of delegates from across the entire state of New South Wales. And so Lou and I decided, this looks amazing. Let's, put our hand up and see if we can get to go to this conference. And one of the added benefits when I looked at this conference is that the keynote speaker for the conference was Kurt Fernley, who was my epic light in the dark and massive, admiration crush, if you can call it that, from even years prior to Paddy being diagnosed. And so the thought of being able to also get to see him as a keynote speaker was just like bucket list criteria for me. So we needed to get to this conference and we were lucky that Lou and I got approved to attend. But the other added benefit was Lou was learning support teacher at the school too. So she said, look, while we're there, it's, still not that far really on to Tamworth. Why don't we go and see if we can check out this school in Tamworth and see exactly how they've set the school up for Morgan and, get some ideas of what we can borrow and bring back to our school to try and set up for Paddy. So again, like massive opportunity that we could just tack on this added win-win as well. So we signed up for that. We got permission off the principal. She thought it was a great idea. And Lou and I hopped in the car and drove for many, many hours to get to Armidale for this conference. And the conference was mind-blowing, like just so incredible. But to watch Kurt Fernley was like, oh, it still gives me tingles. So I knew when his session was coming up, and so I was front row, like as close as I could get without being a VIP to Kurt Fernley on the stage to listen to him speak. And it was so powerful. So he was talking about why we need to give people with disability the dignity of high expectations. But the idea is that across the board, we hold low expectations for people of difference. So whether that's disability, whether that's Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander background, migrant background, and that when we hold low expectations for these people, we limit their potential so significantly. And this really hit home for me. And his whole point was like, no, we need to challenge people. We need to assume that they can do great things because that becomes their narrative and that's their belief. And so they will follow that as well. And he also mentioned, which I thought was really interesting, even he's in a wheelchair. And so he'd say, people would see him down the street going to get a coffee and they'd come up to him and say, oh, you're amazing. Like you're so inspiring getting out here and doing life, And he was saying actually how patronizing that is, because when you're saying things like that, you're basically making an assumption that someone in a wheelchair isn't capable of getting out and having their morning coffee and socializing with friends. And can you see how limiting that is? Like we just assume like, wow, that's inspiring because they did something that everybody else is doing. And it's a tricky one. I find, I can see both sides of the coin on this, because I also have lots of people that come up to me throughout our life and journey with Paddy and say, oh my gosh, he's just so inspiring. And I think for me, Paddy, he's inspiring because not necessarily because of his disability, but because of the challenges that he continues to overcome. And I think there's a fine line between being patronizing and assuming that someone's not capable of, getting out in their wheelchair or not capable of accessing an education. And there's a difference between that and having respect for the fact that I can acknowledge that there's some obstacles that this person's working hard to overcome also to get there. And I don't think necessarily that that's patronizing. I think that's respectful and empowering and trying to encourage and acknowledging that I see you, you're working hard for that, but respect for the fact you're going through that process and you're continuing to do everything that makes you happy and successful in life. So Kurt, he dropped some interesting points that really made me reflect and think. And I swear I heard every word out of his mouth because I was just glued, apart from when I was trying to take notes because I had to, of course, remember it for the rest of my life as well, because this moment was wow. And the other cool thing while he was speaking is they were passing around his medals that he'd won. And he had some medals from the Rio Olympics. And as they were passing around, it actually had just got to me, and the lady passed me, it was a silver medal, I'm pretty sure at the time. And he just happened to comment that like, oh, put your hand up if you've got a medal. So it's me, I put my hand up. And he's like, shake the medal. And you could hear different sounds. And he said they included this element for people who are vision impaired. So a gold medal sounded different to a silver medal, sounded different to a bronze medal when you shook it, so that you could tell you had the right medal. And the other cool feature, they had Braille on the medal. And so here I am, just having again one of those wow moments, listening to my role model Kurt Fernley talk, holding his silver medal that he'd won in Rio, learning that all these features that I'm looking at and hearing on this medal have been put in specifically for people with vision impairment. And knowing at home I have the most incredible kid at home with vision impairment as well. And it was like I can't, so many times these things happen in my life where you just, you're in the right place at the right time because you have that moment and you just think, wow. And then not long after that, they threw open to questions. And I'm like, well, I'll be damned if I'm not asking Kurt a question when I've got the chance to. And, front row, you get your hand up pretty quick, so you get chosen. And the question I actually really wanted to know, because I love Kurt's story, and if you don't know it, look it up. He's just a fabulous guy, a fabulous human being. But he was from a small country town as well. And so there was a lot of parallels there. So my question to Kurt was, what did your parents say to you throughout your childhood that gave you that inner voice to believe you could achieve all the things that you've achieved? Because for me, I knew the power of mindset. I knew how important that was. And, this guy's won gold medals. He's got a teaching degree. He's smashing life. He's got a family. I wanted to know, what's that inner voice in his head say that keeps him going throughout all those years? And he kind of thought about it for a minute. It's like, yeah, right. And he said, I think, the message I took away from my parents as a kid that became my inner voice was that you are so loved, that you're enough, and that you can achieve anything that you want to achieve. And I thought, again, how simple. But if we can parent Paddy with a conscious choice to try and make sure he walks away with all of those same feelings and sentiments, all of our children, I talk about Paddy in this podcast, but what we do for Paddy, we apply to all our kids. To have that mindset, what a gift in life that sadly so many children don't grow up with, or maybe don't feel. And so meeting Kurt, hearing him impart those words of wisdom, hearing his story. And then the coolest part was at the end, he did a meet and greet. So I got to go and messy cry on Kurt and just be like, thanks, Kurt. You made my life so much better. And, tell him about when Paddy was diagnosed and me going for that walk and realizing that he'd be okay, because we knew Kurt and we knew, Scott Reardon existed in the world and that they had fabulous, lives and achieved great things. And so Paddy would be able to do the same. And to have that moment where you get to thank someone for being the light in your dark is so beautiful. It's, like I said, a highlight in my life still today was meeting Kurt and being able to share that moment with him and just have him give me a hug and say, yeah, your son's going to do great things. And, oh, what a conference. That was just one keynote. But there were so many other great things that I learned at that conference that I could bring back to our school, specifically more around, making sure that we were having high expectations and, including and promoting our Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander children and making sure that everyone else around them understood and respected their culture as well. But for me, as a parent of someone with a disability, I cannot, put more emphasis on how important being able to have that moment with Kurt was for me. Once the conference wrapped up, then it was time to start the second leg of our journey, which was to Tamworth to meet Belinda and Morgan. And this was actually the first time I'd get to meet them in person as well. So another cool moment when you've spoken to someone a lot and again, they've been your little lifeline, and then you finally get to see them in real life is a really powerful moment. And you realize how important connecting with people is, because, had, my friend Lauren not happened to know the family and say, again, when everything had happened with Paddy, we know these people, you should give them a call, then I wouldn't have this network to draw on. And meeting Belinda and Morgan and seeing their school was a game changer for Paddy. And I credit this so much with everything that Paddy has in place even today at our school. So we met them down the street, and my first favourite moment was seeing Morgan, who was, I think, from memory, in about year 3-ish or something by then, walking with her cane independently down the street, mum behind, because Morgan had taken off in such a pace to, come and meet us and stuff. And just thinking, look at this kid, look how independent she is. I love it. And she had such a cracking personality as well. And I think from memory, she was in her Taekwondo gear because she'd just been to Taekwondo or something cool. And so, yeah, meeting them in person was a beautiful experience. And then the next day we got to go to their school and see, what does a classroom look like? Who are the amazing teachers? So they had a vision support teacher that got brought into the school specifically for Morgan to teach her Braille. And from there it kind of expanded in that every document really that a teacher would do as a handout or a booklet needs to be then transcribed into Braille so a child who's vision impaired or blind can access the curriculum as well. So there's a huge amount of work in, one, teaching a child Braille from kinder onwards, but then also preparing all the documentation that goes with that so that they can continue to keep learning. So it's a huge task. And at this school, they'd employed a couple of teachers' aides who decided they were also really passionate and wanted to learn more about vision impairment and Braille. And these support teachers had gone and learnt Braille, and they were now doing a lot of the production of documents for Morgan, while the vision support teacher could be in the classroom with her and teaching what she needed to and supporting her learning. The other cool thing we got to see is how they made tactile books. And this was something that was really important, especially, infants, where it's not so much about the words sometimes as the pictures in stories. And when you're missing that, you miss a lot of what the story is. And so these teachers' aides were basically creating tactile books for Morgan. So I pick any kid's book basically, and instead of looking at the pictures on the page, they would think, what are the key elements? And they would make it tactile. So one book from memory was Hansel and Gretel. So they had little people that were made out of tactile things. So the hair was perhaps wool that had been plaited, so you could feel that. The dress she was wearing was made of fabric, and then you had arms and legs coming out of that. And then you might have had the pebbly path, which was made from little stones that were glued into the book as well, so you could feel where the path was. And tactile books are a beautiful thing. They're incredible. And to be able to see the creativity with which they created them, but then also the consistency. So making sure that paths, no matter what book you were reading from then on, a path would always be made like this, so that the child becomes aware that, oh, I'm feeling this, that's definitely a path. Or it might be a book about a kangaroo or a koala. And so they're using fur fabric in that book instead, so that you can feel the fur and understand that it's an animal of some kind. It's just such a creative process. And that's where I think, opened my eyes to the idea that, worrying that Paddy's education would be limited without sight, I saw this and went, no, actually, there are so many more ways to understand the world and learn other than just by sight. And watching someone create a tactile book and seeing the love and creativity that goes into it made these books even more special. And something actually cool that our school did when we came back, having seen that, is we got a year 9 from memory English class as part of one of their English units to do adaptive tactile books. And so what we were clever enough to do was get all of the books that we knew that infants would be reading in kinder year 1, and we got them brailled by our Braille teacher. And then these year 9 students actually went and created the tactile pictures that went with it. So instead of one teacher trying to, make 12 books that could be borrowed at the library for Paddy, we sourced that to year 9 students. Here's the beauty of this moment. Year 9 students then start to learn about vision impairment. They start to understand that people learn in a variety of different ways. They realize that as individuals, they can actually make an impact and help, someone's life be better because they've done something for them. And we had this beautiful little moment actually just before Paddy started school. I'm jumping ahead, but we're going to go there. Just before Paddy started school, where we brought him in to this year 9 classroom, and they all got to sit with him and share their book so he could feel each of their books. And these kids got so much joy and validation out of seeing someone enjoy what they'd created for them. It was just a beautiful little small community moment. And then that meant that, and I'd love every time Paddy would borrow a book from the library when he started school and bring it home, I knew the love and the joy and creativity that these year 9 kids, who are usually, I teach in the high school, so these are my kids as well, had put into that for my son. And how beautiful is that? Honestly. Okay, sorry, back on task. When we went to the school at Tamworth, what we really learned is that this is a model of excellence. And so the vision support teacher was so incredible and passionate. She created this team, like I said, of teachers' aides to support her. But because they were so good at what they did, the school actually started getting more enrollments from children who were vision impaired. And so in the past, there really weren't many vision impaired students attending Catholic schools in that area. But, based on that classic adage from Wayne's World, which I'm sure comes from somewhere deeper than Wayne's World, if you build it, they will come, is the idea. And this is what that school had done. They'd established this and created it for Morgan, but now it was flowing out and benefiting so many other students as well. And this became a really great source of inspiration for both Lou and I in coming back to our school and saying, all right, here's what we've seen. And it was incredible. And so after, a little bit of time, we had a change of principal, which was fine. And everything kind of got handed over really nicely there too. And our new principal decided, I think we actually need to advertise for a vision support teacher as well at our school for Paddy. And while we were really excited about that, we were also a little bit worried because vision support teachers are not easy to find. They are rare as hen's teeth. And we just thought, that's great, but how are we going to find one of these? So my first thought was, I'm going to call Lynn, who we obviously were still working with, and, she had become more than just a colleague or someone that supported Paddy. She was a friend by then. And so I called her up and said, oh, Lynn, you'll never believe our school's decided they want to advertise for a vision support teacher. You don't happen to have any disgruntled staff working with you, do you, that want to jump ship and come and work with Paddy instead? Or I said, how much longer till you're ready to finish up there and come across to the Catholic system? It was a bit in jest, but at the same time, what I realize in life is if you don't ask, you don't get anything. And so there's no harm in asking, right? And so we had a bit of a chuckle, and Lynn's like, well, look, I hope I don't have any disgruntled staff. And, I think at this point I'm kind of happy where I am, but leave it with me and, I'll keep my ear out. And I thought that's all you can do. So within 24 hours, Lynn called me back and she said, I think I've found you someone. And I'm like, are you kidding me? How have you found someone? And she's like, her name's, and I normally try not to name everyone by full in this, but I have to because the beauty's in their last name. Her name's Sharon Hope. And I thought, oh my God, of course it's Sharon Hope. And it was just such a miracle that out of nowhere, Lynn seemed to have plucked this lady. And it wasn't out of nowhere for Lynn because Sharon had worked with her for years in the Department of Education as a vision specialist teacher as well. And she'd recently decided to go and work for Vision Australia instead in orientation mobility, so cane skills kind of work. But, that involves, when you're doing that kind of work, there's a lot of outreach. So you're driving constantly, you're on the road a lot. So it's really challenging on family dynamics as well to be in that role. And Sharon was at a place where she was thinking she wanted to get back more into education. So she was based in one spot more than traveling around. And so we couldn't believe our luck. So we quickly called the principal and passed on Sharon's details, and she interviewed for the job and of course was successful. And the beautiful thing about that was that Sharon was able to be employed before Paddy started school. So probably, I think it was 6 months before he started school, Sharon was on board. And what that meant she could do was, again, work with the Year 9 students to prep these books and start working with teachers to find out what does their program look like, so she could start adapting the curriculum for Paddy so that he could access it. But the other beautiful thing that she did was assist all the other students at our school to understand Paddy and his needs. And so Sharon would walk around school with a cane so that kids would run up to her and say, what are you doing? What have you got? And then she could answer all of those questions. And by being the buffer there, that meant when Paddy walked through the door 6 months later, no one had to ask Paddy, what's that? What are you doing? What have you got? They already knew because they'd asked Sharon that question. The other cool thing she would do is at lunch, she would set up like obstacle courses with, canes and blindfolds, and kids who were intrigued and interested could come over and learn, and she would show them what it's like to use a cane and get some empathy going for what it might be like to have a vision impairment. And she also met with a lot of the other classes either side of Paddy, so more like year 1, year 2. She may have even done the whole school. I can't remember now. Gosh, who knows? She probably did. She's amazing. And she met with these other students to explain a little bit about vision impairment. And actually the other cool thing they did was there was a lady working in Catholic education who was vision impaired in Canberra office who had a guide dog. And so she actually came out to our school for some other training. And while she was there, they got her and Sharon to go around to some of the classes and just talk about vision impairment and get the kids to ask all these questions, because we know that kids are super curious, and it's not necessarily because they want to judge or be evil. They're just curious kids. And so I find, and I've found throughout this whole experience, the challenge lies in if we don't give people the knowledge and the answers, they come up with them themselves, and often that's not correct. And so as an educator, my whole thing in life is if you can teach people and share and educate them, then they're going to be better informed, and that's going to make them behave perhaps as better human beings because they have all of the information that they need. And so Sharon was definitely on board with this kind of concept, and that's what she was doing as well. And she really went above and beyond to make sure our whole school understood what Paddy's needs would be in a really amazing way. So yeah, that's our That's our orientation and getting ready for school preparation. And I love it because there was just so many highlights. And as someone who loves learning new things, getting to go to other schools and see how they did this and learn from Sharon and how she was going to roll out Braille for Paddy. And I find it fascinating and so interesting. And it makes you realize actually how one-dimensional your knowledge is of the world until you encounter someone with disability and you see all the other incredible ways that you can get around in this world and understand it and enjoy it. We've got to be more open-minded, I think, in how we approach our understanding of the world and understanding of people with disability for that reason as well. So some takeaways from this episode. The first and foremost is do not underestimate the power of human connection and its ability to change the lives of others. And again, it's that Kurt connection, knowing him changed my life and hearing his story changed my life for the better, which then impacted how I raised Paddy as well. Having connection with Belinda and Morgan gave us the opportunity to see inside a school that most other parents probably never get the opportunity to do. And we were able to then advocate so beautifully and easily with our own school to make sure Paddy got all the support he needed when he started school from day one. And without that connection, without that, the vulnerability of others to share, we would have missed so many more opportunities. So never underestimate the power of human connection, one-on-one. The other thing that I think is a takeaway is the importance of having trust in others and being willing to be vulnerable. And I feel like on the scheme of emotions, these are probably two of the hardest ones to sit in and feel, but they're so important, and great things come when you can be brave enough to be vulnerable and you're willing to put your trust in other people. I couldn't set up a school for Paddy. That's not my job. It's not my wheelhouse. I could be vulnerable though and share honestly with what he needed. I could use my connections and networks to try and help as much as I could. But ultimately I had to put trust in the principals of our school, who, as I said, changed, and we're on to our third principal now, but you've got to just trust that, one, you'll advocate well enough for yourself or your child. Two, that people are, for all intents and purposes, usually good-hearted, can-do people that want to help you out. And if you can hold a positive expectation outcome for what you want out of it and trust that people will help get you there, it goes wrong. There are times where it doesn't always work. But in the majority of cases, I find if I can trust people and keep open communication with them, things always work out the way they need to. So they're so important. The other thing, finally, is that earth angels are real and they're all around us. And my two classic examples of that is, Lynn and Sharon, who both appeared at just the right time to support us on our journey with Paddy and his vision impairment, and continue to this day to be not just, colleagues that have worked with Paddy, but genuine good friends who we just love and respect. And they just do things above and beyond that you just think, how did we get so lucky to have met these women and have them in our lives? And I think so often we just take people for granted. And so my takeaway for this is, please look around you and think, who's someone that you nearly feel like they were placed here for a reason to just make your life better, or somebody else's life in your family better? Because there are definitely earth angels everywhere. And I think, let's stop and acknowledge them and show them some gratitude today. All right. Thanks so much for listening, guys. I hope you have a fabulous day, and I'll see you next week. Bye. I hope this episode has given you something to reflect on, or some tools that you can implement in your own life. If you know someone who could benefit from this episode, please share it with your family or friends. It would mean so much to me. Remember to stay positive, be grateful, and take each step of the journey with kindness and love in your heart. Until next time, bye.